Extraordinary unfolding news overnight on so many areas. One area, of course, is the war in Ukraine. Keir Starmer hosted various European leaders yesterday, and, of course, President Zelenskyy. Well, we're going to hear from Yalda in just a moment, because Yalda was sitting there next to President Zelenskyy, firing questions at him. Let's listen to a couple of the key takeaways.
Has there been any communication with the administration since the Oval Office meeting? Have they reached out to you? And separately, you talked about resignation a few days ago. How are you thinking about elections?
There
is communication, not on my level. Yes. As regards resignation, my resignation, if I am to be changed, and I'll hear, how can I put it, with what's happening with the support to change me, it will not be easy, because it is not enough to simply hold elections. I said that I'm exchanging it for NATO membership, and then it means that I fulfilled my mission. There is NATO. It means I've fulfilled my mission. Although, honestly, it looks like the people, and I'll not be calling their posts, naming their posts, but the citizens of other countries are telling Ukrainians which president they should have, especially if these people occupy official posts. It seems to me a bit undemocratic and unconstructive.
Yeah, they're absolutely fascinating stuff, obviously, just before he then left the UK and took off back to Ukraine last night. I mean, overall, what was his mood, his vibe? Was he seeming exhausted and rattled, or in fact, quite resolute?
Wilf, good morning. You know, it was quite something to observe. Like I said, I was sitting right beside him at that round table, and I was observing over that hour and a bit that we spent with him in the room. This was a man that didn't appear rattled, actually. I think he was initially rattled after what happened, after the incident, but certainly not, you know, when he walked into that room. There was this feeling that European leaders had embraced him, had reassured him, and made him feel as though he and his country were not alone. Now, this was a hugely difficult tightrope for Sir Keir Starmer to walk, and it appears like he's stepped up to the mark by embracing him here in London for that summit. But what I saw last night was a man that was as defiant, as resolute as we've seen over the course of the last 3 years. I mean, at the very end, Wilf, I was standing next to him as, you know, all the journalists sort of got up to leave the room. And I looked at him and I said, it's been a difficult few days. And he said, actually, it's been a difficult couple of weeks. And I said, actually, it's probably just been a difficult few years. And he said, yeah, I can't tell you how hard it's all been. And so clearly it has rattled him on some level. But Wilf, they're not going to give up on their country. That is the sense I got. And you heard him there when I asked him about cause for him to resign. It didn't feel like he was going to bow down to any of those calls. He said it's undemocratic for citizens of other countries to interfere in our affairs. There was also a question in the room about whether he would apologize to President Trump. And at one point he said, I don't view my country as above anyone, and I don't view it as below anyone. We are equals when it comes to our partners, and we are fighting a war because a full-scale invasion was launched on our country, and we are fighting for freedom and democracy. So nothing about what he said over the course of the last few years, Wilf, feels like it has changed. What made him a spectacular communicator, and what's made him so spectacular on the world stage over the last 3 years clearly backfired on Friday at the Oval Office. But I think he's had some time to reflect. Doesn't feel like he's got major regrets about what he said. I think he regrets that it unfolded the way it did, and he didn't really want to talk about the incident, but he certainly wasn't backing down.
It's fascinating, Yalda, hearing you say that. And by the way, the UK government Defence Minister Luke Pollard did echo kind of what you're saying Zelensky said there, which is that it's for him to decide and his people to decide who's in charge. And they also recommitted that they do think Ukraine will one day join NATO, which of course is at odds with what President Trump said. Just want to explore a little bit more his views looking back on that meeting. We're watching it on the screen now with President Trump. I mean, as you said, no one can understand like he has what he's been through over the last 3 years. And I think a lot of people here have sympathy with that. But on a purely PR basis, dealing with the man he now has to deal with in the White House, do you really think he doesn't have regrets that he didn't play it slightly differently? Even if he shouldn't have had to, might he have got more for his country if he'd played it differently?
You know, Wilf, he was asked in the room whether he thought it was an ambush or a setup, and he didn't want to engage. He said, look, we'll leave that for the history books. We asked him what happened afterwards, whether he was thrown out. Again, didn't want to be drawn into all of that. I mean, no doubt. He was coached throughout the week. We saw Emmanuel Macron there last Monday, carefully choreograph, you know, his dealing with Donald Trump. And then, of course, we saw Sir Keir Starmer. He was coached by his fellow European leaders. But I think the sense I got from him was, you know, that things were really bubbling up under the surface, and they finally just emerged and came out on top of the surface.